Good morning, welcome. This is Angela Coulter, your Consciousness Transformation Ascension Guide, originator of Trinity Energy Progression, bringing you this week's Living the Shift. And so, I want to talk this week about coming to a place of peace with what we're in. Oh, I'm going to turn this sound off. Do this every week. Okay, let's change that. um, so it's hitting a lot of us. Many of us who've been on an active spiritual journey for, you know, 2 weeks, 2 months, 2 decades, it doesn't matter. There are many of us who, in the current state of things, have gotten lost in the wave of all the negativity and pessimism and the fear that the collective has allowed itself to sort of fall into. And we haven't really looked closely, or we're looking closely at it, but they're not really looking beyond what we see in observance to what could be the bigger picture, right? So this all came about, and I was talking with my husband, and I said, it was funny because I always had the inkling that I could be this and do this when I was way younger, and I always thought it'd be cool to be able to see the future and have visions and all that kind of stuff. And then, I've been doing so. Then, I awakened all those abilities within me, and have been doing this for quite a while now, more than a decade. And so, and I'm like, and so a group of friends of mine and I were talking, and we got to this place of saying, what's the purpose that we can see? And we all do the same kind of stuff, and we all do sort of visioning together and sort of work at the collective level and see things from the bigger perspective. And that's sort of what we feel like we're here to do. So we're still, so we were talking about it in a conclave we had a couple weeks ago, and we were like, well, and even a couple days ago. So, what's the purpose of seeing everything? What's the purpose of being able to see what happens if we can't change it, right? So, we sort of got stuck in that. And we were looking at that, and we sort of left it sitting there. But then we went to this place of, moving on and other stuff, whatever. And so I've been looking at that for the past couple weeks, and I have days when I feel really overwhelmed. I have days when I know most people I know that do this kind of work feel overwhelmed and get discouraged, frustrated, angry, all kinds of stuff. And so, I've been looking at that, and then I'm like, well, it's all ego, right? Anytime we feel overwhelmed, anytime we feel like we can't do something, anytime we feel fear or anger or frustration, that all comes from the ego, because the ego, in my understanding, is was created for the exploration of separation and individuality and identity and exclusion, which is where those energies come from. And so, okay, so our goal then in looking at the I'm looking at the whole picture and saying, well, okay, so we do all this work where people talk about being empathic. We talk about being, psychic and all that kind of stuff. And we talk about being empathic, and then we feel everything, we take it on and all that kind of stuff. And then, we have felt like that role for so long has been taking on, the ails of the world, right? So it's not, good morning, Laurel. It's not just the idea that that we get stuck in the ego, right? It's not the idea that we get discouraged or see those energies. It's the habit. What came to me, big epiphany this morning, is the habit of seeing things from the perspective of the collective and taking on the energies of the collective from an egoic standpoint. Because anything in fear, anger, whatever, that's all from the ego right now. Here's the other side. We always say that. But we also then create the idea and understanding of exaltation and bliss and excitement. That's from the ego too. when we come from a place of just like all encompassing unconditional love and divine consciousness, it just is, right? So we're always in that state of, I guess, divine bliss, right? But then there's no like, there's no not that. There's everything becomes that, including the dark side, right? So what happens if we start looking at this and saying, okay, so my ego is the one that's saying, this is overwhelming. Good morning, Gloria. This is overwhelming. This is so heavy. I'm so tired. Everybody's so negative. This is such a pessimistic world. But then wait a second. What is all that? It's all judgment. And judgment comes from the ego. So the ego has now slipped itself into that consciousness, right? That perception of observance and whatever. But and then like sort of slipped itself to say, oh, but because I'm feeling like it's bad. And it's like part of why then we start talking about, good morning, Misty. Part of why we start talking about, when we start talking about things in that way of like, okay, so if I can see, right, which I can, and if I have that vision and we have that perception and can see the future and other timelines, which we all can, it's just a matter of allowing those abilities to come forward. And, like I said, I was having this conversation with my husband and I said, so really the perception is to say, A, the reason I feel overwhelmed by it is that I'm judging it, right? That I'm judging it as bad. It's almost like when we say death is bad, right? As a judgment. Death is just a transition. And so when we get to a different perspective, it's, well, death is just a transition. This is such a small part of our consciousness that's here. And we're so attached to it. We, have excluded a lot of our other consciousness while we're in the body. Like we put these partitions up so we forget. And then we get so attached to this and we get afraid of death, right? And then we have all these ideas of like what death is like, but it's simply a transition. And then the more we get to see from the bigger picture, the more we realize, okay, nothing ever dies. It just changes form or becomes part of the whole again or whatever. And so we then stop judging death, right? So what will it take for us in more consciousness to stop judging the collective and what's going on? Well, we're so in the habit and the addiction of getting pulled into, swept into. And when we talk about that whole empathic thing, we're in the habit of allowing ourselves to get swept into the negativity and exclusionary kind of energies. And because we love it at some level, right? And I've talked about that in many other forums in my Monday Morning Ascended World with Sarah C. Gavagnoni. We've talked about that and all that kind of stuff. We love it. We created it. We create that exclusionary energy and emotion and all kind of stuff. So what if we start changing things, right? And we start looking at things from a different perspective. And instead of saying, so like, okay, so the first step is seeing the judgment for what it is. So judging that this is all excuse my French, but a shit show or whatever you want to judge it as, right? As things are collapsing or imploding or, crazy and out of control, right? And we get scared from that, and that's fear, and that's ego-based. And that's anger, and that's ego-based. And when we say, and with separation, but we're so addicted to those, what we call the negative emotions, that we forget that we can utilize the upside as well, the excited, positive emotions as on top of it, right? So what if we got up this morning and instead of said, oh my gosh, I don't want to look at social media or I don't want to see what's going on, we say, oh my gosh, I'm so excited because this is all coming together the way we planned it. And even all of these crazy nitty gritty details that we just were like, wow, this is incredibly cool, right? That's using the ego in a different way entirely and shifting the energy. And when we shift the energy into a much more positive state, then the ego can sort of sit back and be like, I'm going to watch this. I'm going to look at it. And then we can step back and then like release that hold that our energy that it has on our energy. And we can step back even further to the bigger picture and then sit in that place of love, right? And wholeness. That's a completely different way of existing, right? And I started to think this morning when all of this was coming in, because I'll tell you what, I know I've gone through it. Many of my close friends, Soul Tribe, have gone through it or are going through it off and on this, okay, I'm just trudging through every day. I'm just getting through because, this is crazy and ridiculous and things are, blah, blah, blah. Like I said, all judgment. And we don't even realize we're judging within the judgment. We're judging the judgment, which is sort of funny. So then let's judge it in a good way. Let's say, hey, look at what a great job we're doing, right? And so, okay, so let's even step back for a second. And this can trigger people, right? Because we're addicted to that negativity. What if we use the ability to engage the ego with the higher consciousness to expand things to a more positive outlook and become optimistic versus pessimistic? What if we started a movement to say things like, okay, well, look at the numbers for the virus. Let's go to that because that's all over the place and that's all we ever talk about, right? So let's look at the numbers of the virus. Let's look at the numbers. Look at the people. Oh, look at the number of people that have gotten the virus. Isn't it great that we have only been affected by less than 1% of the population? Isn't that fabulous? That something new like this that has spread, whatever, and out of the less than 1% of the population that has actually been affected by this virus that everybody's like watching so closely, that like 0.9 is like 99.8% recover. Pretty crazy and pretty awesome to say what a great job our immune systems are doing, what a great job we are doing in consciousness to actually allow that to be more integrated into our reality. What if we did that? And at first you say, well, that's crazy, right? But we're only saying that's crazy. Again, that's a judgment because everybody insists on taking the negative side of it, right? And we've created this big tsunami of negativity. And so, like I said, that addiction, being empathic and connected into the collective, is the addiction is to grasp onto the negativity, even though we say it hurts us or it makes us tired or overwhelmed or whatever. But really, we love it or else we wouldn't do it. We love the dark just as much as the light, and then we love hating the dark, right, just as much as the light, right? So it's that having is evidence of wanting. So when we go into that place of having is evidence of wanting, and we say, okay, well, look at what we created. And it's like, well, okay, look how we created it, and we introduce this into our reality. And really very few people have even been affected by it. And those who've chosen to use that as their doorway to transition, again, no fear of death or no judgment of death, except for maybe saying that death is a great graduation because that means you're done with the set of lessons that you are here. Even if you're 10 or 5 or 6 months or 98, it doesn't matter, right? So when we start to shift our perspective and we start to say, okay, what if we commit ourselves to addiction to positivity, right? And addiction to optimism versus addiction to negativity, right? Yeah. Yeah, Kim says, like, what would we do if we reported every death for every reason every day, all over the media? It would be overwhelming. Yeah, I mean, and it's overwhelming just to see that they're reporting every death and every person that's gotten this virus every day. That's the only news breaking stuff that comes up on my news feed. And I'm just like, I'm done with it. I turned off all of my news now because I don't even watch the news. And that was the only news I was seeing. I even turned off all my news notifications on my feed because I was just like, I don't need to see this. And it's like, yay, we're still under 1% of the population that's actually been affected by this virus. So what if we started a big wave to neutralize that the pessimistic, wave of negativity, right? What if we started a big wave of optimism and started posting everyday numbers saying, wow, isn't this great? Look at how great this is that 99% plus percent of the population is even affected by this. That's great. And that less than, I think it's like 0.01 in the United States. I haven't looked at the whole number of it, but it's like 0.01 of the population, 0.01% of the population is only 0.01. That's like in marketing, when I was in corporate and marketing, that would be statistically negligible. That would be something that we totally ignored because it really didn't mean anything. So to say that the deaths in the U.S. were actually statistically negligible because it is like 0.01% of the population. When you start to look at it that way, right, it changes the entire energy of it. What if we all started to say things like that? What if we decided to commit ourselves to being the positive newscasters to say, hey, look at how awesome we're doing. Look at how awesome our immune systems are, and look at how awesome that we are as an integrated whole, that we can accept something like that into our reality and still really be relatively unaffected by it. Because when you start looking at it that way, and again, right away, the mind tries to, the mind addicted to that negativity goes, oh, oh no, no, that's crazy. Like, how could you do that? Like, that's criminal to say things like that. And it's like, except, there are so many things that we sit here and this is what I've been banging my head against the wall about is like, why? Why are we still like, every day we're still focusing on this? We're locking down, we shut down our economy, we've shut down our world for less than 1% of the population for something that will eventually just pass through us because it's a virus and it's pretty harmless, honestly, in terms of the bigger picture. So, what has happened through all this? Well, it's shown us what a really crappy healthcare system we have in this country, because if something that affects less than 1% of the population has taken down a lot of the hospitals, then there's something really broken about it, isn't there? Right? So the good part about that is, oh, look at what it's shown us that we can change, right? We can change that. Well, how can we do that better? Well, what if we talked about, immune system growth, like healthy living and, again, positive living? Because guess what? We have many, many, many scientific studies that show how our bodies are affected by negativity and positivity, that we actually allow more toxins in, we get more sick the more negative and pessimistic we are. Well, look at what we're doing. We're just making ourselves more sick and we're making ourselves more fearful and all that kind of stuff. But what if we commit ourselves to the other side to say, yeah, look at how awesome we're doing, and we're going to continue that way. And not only that, we're going to get better at it, because look at what it's shown us, what we were like sort of being blind to before. So if we all like committed, right? If we instead of feeling like Eeyore every morning, right? We changed our whole like perspective and our whole path to say, okay, well, fine, I'm going to utilize the ego in the positive way to help neutralize all this the tsunami that's sort of like it's drowning so many. That what if we just said, okay, well, that's my commitment. My commitment is I'm going to be healthier. I'm going to talk about living a healthier life. And living a healthier life means living a more positively oriented. If you want to look at studies having to do with how things affect our bodies, right? You can look at Dr. Emoto's stuff, the Hidden Messages in Water, great studies. You can look at the intention experiment, a lot of Lynn McTaggart stuff. There are so many things out there now in quantum physics alone that go and show us how the way we put energy to something is the way we create it, right? So what if we start to really commit ourselves to that positivity? And it was funny because as soon as I saw that, I was like, wow, how did I not see that before? Because I'm typically a very positive person, but I have felt drowned lately. I felt so drowned in what's been going on at the collective and not understanding, like, why doesn't everybody see this? And it's like, well, because we are so addicted to going into that pessimism and then going into that fear. And that's that cycle that we've had. How do we break the cycle? What if we just do it differently? What if we actually just go and decide to do it, like be positive and say, wow, this is great. What a great world we live in that we've created, that we can have a brand new virus, even if it was man-made. And 99.8% of us 99.8%, by the way, of who get it recover no problem. Yeah, like I said, put good food and thoughts into our body. When we start saying that and we get up every day and we go, well, yep, and today is going to be even better. And then we start projecting that and we start sharing that with others. And I think we should share this on social media and share this, everywhere we can post, because then at some point, even the media outlets who are dedicated to that pessimism and the fear mongering, right, have to start picking up a different tone, because if the population does, they'll just stop listening and paying attention, right, which they're doing. And so That's where it is for us to look. And to say, you know what, okay, I appreciate this. I appreciate all the addiction I've had to this negativity. I've appreciated all the suffering and what I've created in separation, because that's all been created in exclusion and duality and with the ego. And now let's explore this ego thing in the positive side. Let's see what it looks like and accept the negative as what it is and say, oh, you know what? And I love you for the perfection that you are, for what we chose to, try. And when we start to do that, it just changes the way everything flows, and it changes what's within us. That's where it comes from, to have ourselves be healthier. And when we start focusing on different things, on living. Yes, I appreciate the lessons. Exactly. Gloria says, I appreciate all the lessons from that negativity. And now I'm ready for something else. And something else that's going to be a completely different experience. What I'm going to just commit myself to everything, seeing everything as the divine and perfect, and looking for the bright side of things. Oh God, I know there's a Monty Python song from that. Looking at the bright side of life. That's it. That's singing in my head. So, so let's commit to that. Let's commit to looking at that within ourselves, and to catching ourselves in that habit of negativity. And instead of saying, oh, I just don't see why everybody doesn't see it, saying, you know what? I'm glad I see it, and I'm excited to see it and share it. And I'm going to ask everybody else that I know and love to share it too, because why not? Let's spread that wave. That feels so much nicer. And that's how, we keep on asking the question, how do we move forward from this? How do we break free from this cage we've created for ourselves? Which is what we've done. And this is it. This is the way. And it was great to come to me, because it was very exciting after feeling, it's almost like I had to hit that, like, oh my God, I feel like I'm going to suffocate under the weight of this world and all this crap and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, wow, this is so not me anyway, right? But then it was like, oh, it's sort of like I just busted out of the whole thing, because I'm like, well, wait a second. If it's all perspective, we have control. We don't change what is happening in the bigger picture, right? That's where that whole discussion came from, right? We can change the way we experience it, and maybe that's the change and the difference of what we need to do, because then we have different outcomes when we start to live it in a more positive sense, right? So what if everybody who sees this, everybody who goes on social media today, goes to the CDC website and says, oh, here are the numbers for today. Look at how awesome we're doing. We are still well under 1% of the population that's even been affected by this virus. We are at 0.01% of the population has died having any relation to this virus. And we even know those numbers aren't even accurate. We know that. I mean, they're even admitting to that, right? But so like we have gotten into this, like, okay, well, if we're going to go into the dark, let's really dig into it. Let's dig into the conspiracy stuff. Let's dig into the population control and all kinds of stuff. What if we just let that lie and said, you know what, I'm just going to change it. I'm just going to do it differently. I'm going to change my experience of it. And holding that light, or holding that energy and that vibration gives everybody around you the excuse and the permission to do that themselves. So much different way of experiencing this. And we can shift this on a dime if we all just change our ego's job in this, to say, what if I asked you to look on the bright side of life? And like, instead of saying, oh, well, this, and again, I'm like listening to the thoughts and saying, God, this is so ear, like, oh, well, this is just terrible. This will just never get better, blah, blah, blah. And then there's the part of me that's like, you want to live with that? Do you want to accept that? And that's what's been sort of like having a lot of friction within me, right? So then when this all sort of busted through this morning, and it was all because I keep on seeing so many of us are posting out there, look at the numbers. The numbers are so low. Why are we doing this? And like we're curling up in the fetal position for something that's really not affecting us, like even as much as pretty much about the same as seasonal flu, right? Which, by the way, I've never taken any notice of, because I don't get it, because my commitment is to having a healthy life, right? So, and it's to get ourselves up out of that fetal position, to put on our big girl panties and a big boy panties and say, all right, I am the divine. I chose to embody myself here through this, and it's what I wanted to experience. And there's a reason for me to have this consciousness and remembrance, and the foresight and the vision and the predictive abilities and everything else. What if, how do we change, like, how can I do the best of this, that I can do? And what if I commit to doing it in a way that's full of that love? Because, it's really interesting. We talk about duality, and we've talked about, and this is all these things that were like, bam, bam, bam. Like, wow, I can't believe I didn't see this. So many things we talk about. Okay, well, you can't have the light without the dark. You also can have the dark without the light. So if we have this massive, big wave of pessimism and darkness that's come up, which is great, there's also this other beautiful, amazing ability in duality of the explosion of expression of that light. And then for us to embrace it, have both embrace each other, to then allow that wholeness to come back into play. So there's so much that we can do with this. And we can do something about it. So when we're sitting here feeling defeated and overwhelmed and whatever, first is for us to recognize our addiction to that, our blindness to it. And these are the things that many of us have been talking about recently, about what are we being blind to because nothing's changed. What are we still being blind to? This is it. This is what I feel like is it. It's we're being blind to our own judgment, our own addiction, and then our own judgment on the addiction, to that dark side of life, to that suffering, to that whatever, and fear-based and doing lessons. And that's how we can do it differently. And that's just changing the energy. When we shift the positivity, right? And we shift to the energy to support ourselves and to say, I can do this. I am invincible. I am the divine. And even if I die today, which is really what I said from the beginning, it's like, even if I died from this, I'd be fine with it. Doesn't make me fear it, because I'm not afraid of dying. Because if it's my time and I'm done, And then the ego wants to say, oh, yay, thank God, right? But we've also loved this, and we've been addicted to this kind of existence too. So, which is why we keep on embodying ourselves here, because you and I are the same too, just embodied in different representations in this dream. So that's our home play for this week, is, get out there and start spreading, and not only just spreading positive stuff, because I've always done that, but then we question does that help, right? But also take the stuff that the media is making negative and shift that to the positive thing, right? Wow, look at what a great job we're doing. Look at how innately powerful we are to be able to just move on and survive and live, not just survive, but live, because with all this, and we feel oh wait, we've been looking at this in this other perspective, but look at this. We think we have to control this, but why? Because look, we already have it under control. It's already even if it surges, right? What's it going to do? So the thing is, again, like I said, 99.8% of the population, I get it, get over it. And who's to say the other point? I mean, we have 6 times. What I was looking at, 6 times the population of what has been affected by this virus, right? Who die of heart disease every year, right? But we're not banning fast food. We're not doing all that kind of stuff. So I don't even want to get into that conversation. So what if we say, look at this? Oh my gosh, we got this one licked. All right, now let's lick heart disease. Let's lick cancer. And you know what? By the way, cancer caused by toxins caused by negativity, suffering, all that kind of stuff. That kind of energy that we hold, that's what the whole epidemic really is, right? Of cancers and all that kind of stuff, or these toxins and things that we put into our body, not just the things we put into our body, but our thoughts and our words, our energy, the way we live it. So what if we change it all? Then we could get rid of cancer like that. We can get rid of all kinds of stuff, because all of those illnesses are all having to do with what we hold inside of us when we feel like we're not divine, when we believe that we're unworthy, and that we believe that we are separate from the whole. And that's really part of this whole journey, is that remembrance, is getting to that place of wholeness and remembering that we've never been apart from it. So it's baby steps, but take everything. So what if we just took everything that we start to feel down about and turn it around to be like, hey, you know what? I'm going to put let's, you know what, that we put this whole marketing twist on how negative this is. I'm going to put a whole marketing twist on how positive it is. And it doesn't matter. It doesn't make one better or worse than the other. It just makes it a different perspective. And then it sort of balances the whole thing out. Food for thought. So on that, I'm out there with you. And don't think you're ever alone, because we're all in this together. We are in this together. And I'm not talking about the virus. I'm talking about this whole shifting. And so remember, we're out there together. And when we remember that wholeness, we totally can recognize that. So start this, baby steps. We'll see this. We'll see what we can do this week, right? And then we'll move on to next week. We'll see you next time. This is Angela Coulter signing out with this week's Living the Shift. Have a good one.